Photography can be used to persuade, dissuade, evoke emotion, and capture beauty. At its most fundamental, though, it bears witness. A visual document immortalizing history directly onto paper. Nowhere was this more true than during the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were put to death by the Nazis between 1941 and 1945. I am making this video barely a month after the events of October 7th, 2023, in which 1,400 Jews were massacred by Hamas militants in Israel. A modern-day pogrom that saw more Jews die than in any event since the Holocaust. With anti-Semitism also on the rise in many cities across the world, I think it's therefore apt to examine the photography of the Holocaust in order to remind ourselves of our own history. Nowhere is this captured better than through the photography of Henryk Ross, a Jewish photographer himself interned in the Lodz Ghetto in Poland. His photography not only serves as direct witness to many of the Nazis' crimes, but is also a reminder to us of what can happen when such unbridled hatred is allowed to go unchecked. Born in 1910, Henryk Ross was working as a sports photographer when Germany invaded Poland. Through their Lebensraum plan, the Nazis planned for Poland to become the living space for resettled ethnic Germans. As part of this strategy, the country's Jews were corralled into a series of ghettos, the second largest of which Henryk Ross was confined to, the Lodz Ghetto. At just 4.1 square kilometers in size, it became home to over 160,000 Jews, brought in from all over Europe. Here, Jews were prevented from leaving by barbed wire fences, marked with the Star of David, and forced to work in Nazi factories producing goods for the German war effort. As a photographer, Henryk Ross was somewhat fortunate as he was employed by the Jewish administration, a subset of Jews within the ghetto who oversaw the community on behalf of the Germans. This group received preferential treatment, and while it's unclear just how much a part of this Ross was, the job spared him from the worst of the ghetto. Assigned to the statistics department, Ross's job was to make ID photographs for the workers, as well as take images showing orderly factory production and smiling workers to be used for German propaganda. While the job provided Ross with both work and access, though, it's the unsanctioned photographs the photographer took during this time that revealed the true living conditions and other horrors occurring in the ghetto. When I had more free time, Henryk Ross told an Israeli court during the trial of Adolf Eichmann, I also used to take photographs which it was forbidden to take. The young photographer used his own ingenuity along with a considerable amount of bravery to document the ghetto's horrific conditions. And horrific they were. Families of 8 would be confined to just one room, and both disease and hunger were rife. A lack of heating would mean that entire families would be found frozen to death in the mornings, and it's estimated that as many as 20% of the ghetto's inhabitants ultimately died of hunger during their time there. In order to capture such scenes, Ross depended on both his ingenuity and courage. To get film, he would take photographs of several people at once during his ID sessions, and then meticulously cut out each individual in order to stockpile film he could use elsewhere. Out in public, he would then conceal his Leica under his coat, with his hands in his pockets, which were cut open from the inside so that he could manipulate the controls of his camera. When he came upon a worthy scene, he would then direct his body towards the action, slightly part his coat, and quickly click the shutter. His wife Stefania often acting as the lookout. This is one of Henryk Ross's most famous photographs, taken in 1944 at the Lodz Ghetto railway station, showing the deportation of Jews to a concentration camp. In the photo, we see a group of people standing in front of a cattle car, overlooked by the ghetto police and an SS soldier carrying a gun. The inside of the cattle car remains in complete darkness, but the entrance is illuminated just enough to see a policeman pulling a person inside. Ross captured this scene at incredible risk to his own life. Under the guise of a cleaner, Ross snuck into the railway station one morning and had his friends shut him in a storeroom. There he waited from 6 in the morning until 7 in the evening and captured the unfolding scenes through a small crack in the wall, explaining why the image is framed in the way that it is. He later testified at trial.
I saw this transport leaving. I heard the cries. I saw the beatings. I saw the shootings. I saw them being murdered.
While many of Henryk Ross's photographs show the horrors of ghetto life, others show a lighter side. Young love, family celebrations, happy-looking people. On one hand, they reveal the resilience of human beings under even the most distressing circumstances, while on the other, they reveal distressing truths about hierarchies within the ghetto and paint a much more nuanced picture of the oppressed and oppressors. This is because within the ghetto itself, there was a subset of Jews who fared better than the rest. This small minority, known as the Jewish administration, consisted of a small group of Jews who managed the affairs of the ghetto as intermediaries to the Germans and lived lives of relative comfort compared to their neighbors. Their leader, Mordecai Chaim Runkowski, was seen by many as not only cruel and domineering, but as an accomplice to the Nazis' crimes. He oversaw factory production, food distribution, and policing within the ghetto. Ross's most disturbing images of this relationship is of 2 children playing, known as Jew and ghetto policemen. In it, 2 children are playing what was apparently a popular game in the ghettos across Europe at the time. One is acting as a ghetto policeman, wearing a uniform and holding a stick, pretending to hit the other boy, dressed as a Jew. The photograph was taken after 1942, in which most of the children in the ghetto had already been sent to their death, and is most certainly of 2 children belonging to members of the Jewish administration. Obviously disturbing, the photograph raises many questions about the psychology of these children, their coping mechanisms, and how their young minds adapted to the environment they were living in. This added layer of complexity within Henryk Ross's archive is one of the reasons it was not seen in its entirety until 1997. Many were just not ready to see or accept the realities they entail. Before judging these people too harshly, though, perhaps it is also worth trying to contextualize the Jewish administration within the larger picture. Yes, they were the elites within the ghetto they lived, and no doubt prospered off the backs of their fellow Jews. But within the grander hierarchy, they were still victims, and by the end of the Holocaust, over 95% of them had also been sent to their deaths. By some extraordinary piece of luck, Henryk Ross survived World War II. Out of an original population of 160,000, Ross and his wife were just 2 of 877 that were left in Lodz as part of a cleaning crew after the remaining population was sent to Auschwitz. They were liberated by the Russian Red Army in mid-January 1945. Furthermore, his negatives survived. In the final days of the ghetto, realizing he would most likely be sent to his death along with the others, Ross hid his negatives in jars and buried his archive in the ground, witnessed by several friends lest they should not all survive. After being liberated, he returned and dug them up, and while some had sustained water damage, a large portion survived. In 1961, Ross's surviving images played the ultimate role of witness, as evidence in the trial of the Nazi Adolf Eichmann, one of the masterminds behind the Holocaust. Both his images and his own testimony played an important role in convicting the Nazi leader, the only ever tried on Israeli soil.